Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to force things to happen, the more reality seems to resist you? There's a hidden rhythm beneath the noise of Ambition One that doesn't respond to pressure, but to presence. This story gently invites you into a quieter dimension where energy, not effort, shapes the world you see. So before we begin, take a slow breath. Soften your shoulders. Check in with your body. Where are you joining us from today? And what time is it as you listen? Whether you're winding down or just waking up, this story will meet you there. Tonight, we explore the stillness within the part of you that doesn't hustle, doesn't prove, but simply tunes in. You'll discover how your nervous system speaks to the quantum field, how coherence forms the blueprint of reality, and how subtle shifts in your internal state can ripple out into your external life. Not by trying harder, but by aligning deeper. So come closer. Let the noise fall away and listen to the language that life has been speaking all along. There is a moment, subtle and often missed, that arrives not with fanfare, but with silence. It's the pause between efforts, the soft breath after you've tried everything. You visualized, journaled, affirmed, planned, and poured your energy into manifesting a life that finally feels like a yes. And yet, there's still friction. Reality doesn't bend on command. The more you try to push, the more it pushes back, not cruelly, not vindictively, but as if it's holding up a mirror saying, "Not this way." And maybe you felt that odd sense that something deeper is trying to get your attention, not through the loudness of force, but through the gentle invitation of resonance. This story begins there, not at the peak of striving, but at the quiet threshold of surrender. Because what if the key isn't to try harder, but to try differently? What if reality isn't a machine to command, but a field to tune into? And what if the reason things haven't worked isn't because you're wrong, but because you're out of rhythm with yourself? We are taught from the start to be performers of change, to do more, to want more, to push our desires into form through sheer will. And for a while, that illusion works. You hustle, you fight, you visualize, you affirm. And sometimes it even appears to reward you until you begin to notice the cost. The burnout behind the smile, the anxiety beneath the dream board, the contradiction between your hopeful words and your tightened chest. You say you trust the process, but your breath is shallow. You say you're abundant, but your body feels threatened. You repeat mantras about love while scanning for signs that it's safe to relax. This isn't failure. This is misalignment. Because the field this vast, intelligent, quantum field that underlies every moment of your life doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your state, your signature frequency. And that frequency isn't just energy. It's emotional coherence. It's what happens when your breath, your heart, your mind, and your nervous system begin to sing in harmony, instead of competing for control. This is not a metaphor. The HeartMath Institute and other researchers have shown that your heart emits an electromagnetic field thousands of times more powerful than your brain. When you're calm, appreciative, present, this field becomes ordered, rhythmic like a beautiful wave pattern. But when you're anxious or self-judging, the heart's rhythm becomes jagged. That erratic rhythm is sent to the brain, which then reflects it back through fragmented thoughts, reactive emotions, and misaligned behavior. It's a loop, one that most people live inside without ever realizing it. You try to force clarity while broadcasting confusion. You try to manifest peace while radiating inner conflict. And the field? It simply mirrors back your signal, not because it's withholding, but because it's exquisitely precise. It gives you not what you want, but what you are in that moment. This realization doesn't require panic. It requires pause. It asks you to soften, not to sprint. Because the secret isn't in doing more, it's in being clearer. You don't need more goals. You need more coherence. And coherence is not about pretending everything is fine. It's about being honest in the body. It's about noticing where you're holding fear and meeting it with breath. It's about feeling appreciation, not because everything is perfect, but because your system becomes coherent in the presence of gratitude. Even micro moments of genuine appreciation, 30 seconds of noticing the softness of a blanket, the warmth of tea, the way sunlight touches your skin, these moments begin to entrain the nervous system into rhythm again. And rhythm is reality's language. The more rhythmic your inner world, the more responsive your outer world becomes, not through force, but through invitation. The Taoists knew this. They called it Wu Wei, not doing nothing, but effortless action, flow without force, harmony with the way things are moving. Yogis called it Samadhi, emerging with the stillness beneath thought. Mystics from every tradition discovered the same portal through different symbols. The truth doesn't belong to any system. It lives in the silent spaces they all point toward. And when you enter that space, when your nervous system begins to trust the moment as it is, you become a tuning fork. You stabilize. You vibrate. And the field responds, not because you've earned it, but because you've become resonant with it. Most people don't notice this shift when it begins. It's too gentle for ego to applaud. You just feel a little less urgent, a little less hooked. You breathe deeper without trying. You hear your own thoughts without judgment. You don't abandon your intentions, you just stop strangling them. The outcomes matter, but not at the cost of your inner stability. That shift in priority rewires everything. You begin to trust the quiet more than the noise. You lean into subtle alignment instead of loud performance. And then the external starts to respond differently. Not dramatically, but with elegance. The right email arrives. A conversation you needed unfolds. You find the missing piece of your puzzle in a book you almost didn't pick up. These are not coincidences. They are harmonics. Echoes of the coherence you've cultivated within. Still, the mind wants strategy. It asks, how do I stay in that state? And the answer, softly, is practice. Not rigid technique, not spiritual perfectionism, but daily return. One breath, one gentle pause, one honest check-in with your body. The nervous system doesn't change through force. It changes through rhythm, repetition, safety. When you regularly send your system signals that say, you are safe to soften, something beautiful begins to happen. Your body stops scanning for danger in every delay. Your emotions stop hijacking your vision. Your breath becomes a companion, not a hostage. And your presence? It becomes magnetic, not in a performative sense, but in a stabilizing one. People feel you differently. You become the person others feel safe to exhale around. You become the stillness in the room. Let's explore something deeper now. What happens when you no longer use presence as a tool to get something? What happens when alignment is no longer a means to an end, but an end in itself? This is where the quantum field becomes not just a mirror, but a partner. Not because you've manipulated it correctly, but because you've surrendered your need to manipulate. You begin to understand that coherence is its own reward, that peace is not the absence of desire, but the clarity of it, and that the universe doesn't test you, it tunes with you. Every delay, every detour, every unanswered prayer becomes a signal not of punishment, but of precision. The field is saying, wait, there's a better rhythm. Tune again. Breathe again. Come back to yourself. And so, the real practice is not in staying high vibe or relentlessly positive. It's in becoming the kind of listener reality responds to. A coherent field doesn't yell. It doesn't beg. It doesn't grasp. It hums. It stabilizes. It broadcasts. I am ready when you are. And life, this intelligent, responsive mystery, listens. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are between frequencies. And this moment, it is not empty. It is tuning you. Let's continue to listen. The next part will go even deeper, God. If part 1 whispered the invitation to soften, part 2 opens the door and lets you walk into the spaciousness that has always been waiting. But not as a guest, you walk in as the architect who unknowingly designed it. This space, this stillness, this soft intelligence underneath the mind's chatter was never separate from you. It was just quiet. And in a world addicted to noise, the quiet often feels like failure, like emptiness, like you're doing it wrong. But here, inside this pause, you begin to feel something unfamiliar, but unmistakably true. This isn't emptiness. It's fullness in a different language. Not the fullness of things, but the fullness of presence. And the more you sit with it, the more it begins to speak, not in words, but in sensations, rhythms, vibrations. You are tuning, not to some distant frequency outside you, but to the intelligence that breathes you, beats your heart, and waits patiently beneath every moment you've spent trying to escape yourself. You may notice it in a simple breath, not forced, just witnessed. A soft inhale like the sea returning to shore. A gentle exhale like the tide releasing its grip. You begin to feel how your breath is not a mechanical task, but a sacred conversation. Each inhale says, I receive. Each exhale says, I surrender. And if you stay with it long enough, the breath begins to realign the mind, not with logic, but with rhythm. Thought becomes less sharp. Emotion becomes less sticky. Time slows not in minutes, but in urgency. The present moment expands its wings, and suddenly you're not chasing peace anymore. You're sitting inside it. And peace, you realize, isn't passive. It's potent. It's the field in which clarity returns, the space where chaos stops being frightening and starts becoming information. It's here that a deeper realization dawns. The chaos was never the enemy. It was the teacher. The confusion, the resistance, the emotional static, these were signals. Alerts from your body and your field saying, there's a dissonance here. Something is misaligned. And the only reason they felt overwhelming is because we were taught to fear discomfort. But what if discomfort is not a punishment, but a portal? What if every spike of anxiety, every surge of tension, every restless night is your nervous system's way of inviting you back into coherence? This shift in perception is everything. Because now, instead of fighting the dissonance, you begin to listen to it. You place your hand on your chest. You say softly, I hear you. And your body, after years of being silenced by productivity, begins to speak again, not in panic, but in rhythm. This is healing, not as a finish line, but as a RECONNECTION. At this point, a question may arise. But how do I live in the world? Like this? How do I function in a culture built on noise and performance? The answer is not to isolate. The answer is to become a stabilizing frequency within the chaos. Think of a tuning fork struck in a noisy room. It doesn't yell to be heard. It just vibrates. And over time, it entrains the surrounding strings to its pitch. That's what coherence does. It doesn't dominate. It harmonizes. So your presence, grounded, calm, rhythmically breathing, becomes a kind of silent leadership. People around you feel safer, even if they don't know why. Conversations become less reactive. Opportunities unfold with less friction. And you begin to navigate life, not as someone grasping for certainty, but as someone anchored in rhythm. This is the true nature of embodiment, not just thinking differently, but being differently. Let's go deeper into this field that listens. The quantum field, the unified field of consciousness, energy, potential, is not mystical in the way movies portray it. It's mystical in the way breath is mystical. Simple, omnipresent, often ignored. It responds to coherence the way an antenna picks up a frequency. When you are in a clear emotional state, not perfect, but integrated, you become receptive. Your mind stops scrambling for control. Your body stops resisting. And suddenly, new insights arrive, not because you worked harder, but because you stopped jamming the signal. This is not magical thinking. This is energetic hygiene. Just as a radio can't receive a clear station with too much static, your nervous system can't receive guidance while flooded with unresolved tension. Coherence clears the static, and in that clearing, the next step often reveals itself not as a loud directive, but as a gentle pull. A knowing. A yes that doesn't need proof. Many people confuse this with passivity, but there is nothing passive about alignment. In fact, it's one of the most courageous states you can inhabit. It requires you to trust the subtle over the obvious, to honor the internal shift before the external outcome. And perhaps most challengingly, it asks you to wait without collapsing into doubt. This is the edge where most people turn back. The delay feels like failure. The silence feels like absence. But in reality, this is where the field is doing its most precise work. It's not ignoring you. It's integrating your signal. It's rearranging the unseen so that the visible can land in a way that is resonant, not random. Here's an image. Imagine you're trying to tune a violin. You keep turning the pegs, adjusting the strings, trying to make it sound right, but your hand is shaky. Your ear is distracted. You're impatient. So the more you adjust, the more it sounds off. Then, finally, you stop. You close your eyes. You breathe. You listen. And in that stillness, your hand finds the right tension. The string hums true. That's what happens when you stop grasping at reality and start attuning to it. The field doesn't need to be pushed. It needs to be met. And it will meet you at the frequency you're brave enough to embody. But how do you know when you're aligned? Not by external results. Those come in their own time. You know by the feeling of internal congruence. When your thoughts match your breath. When your desire doesn't clash with your body's rhythm. When your inner dialogue softens. From interrogation to observation. That's coherence. It feels like exhaling without effort. Like resting in motion. Like being held by something invisible and wise. Of course, you will drift. You will forget. You will tighten again. But that's not failure. That's the nature of rhythm. There is no static perfection, only continuous return. Like waves on a shore. Like breath. Like life itself. The practice is not in never leaving the state. It's in remembering how to return. And each return makes the next one easier. Each return builds a new baseline. Eventually, coherence becomes less of a state you visit and more of a home you live in. And from this home, something unexpected begins to happen. Your capacity expands, not just for peace, but for presence. You can feel more without being overwhelmed. You can hold space for others without losing your center. You can move through uncertainty without collapsing into urgency. This is the fruit of coherence, not just better outcomes, but a deeper experience of being alive. We've been told that life rewards the loud, the fast, the forceful. But what if life also rewards the rhythmic, the aware, the still? What if your greatest breakthroughs don't come from climbing the next hill, but from sitting at the base and listening? What if healing isn't about fixing what's broken, but remembering what's coherent beneath the noise? You are not becoming someone new. You are remembering the signal beneath the static. And that signal is your essence unshakable, gentle, magnetic dot. So here you are, not at the end, but in the thick of a frequency shift, so soft it would be easy to miss. The shift doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand that you change everything overnight. Instead, it invites you to notice gently, tenderly, that you already have. The way your body holds less tension before the day begins. The way you pause before reacting. The way you sense when something feels right without needing evidence. These are not small things. These are tectonic shifts in your reality architecture. You are no longer designing your life with blueprints drawn in panic. You're allowing a quieter intelligence to take the lead, not by abandoning choice, but by honoring coherence. And from this space, something profound becomes clear. Universe was never working against you. It was simply too precise to respond to the parts of you that were misaligned. It waited until your signal was clean. Now it listens differently. And now you begin to listen differently too. This is where resonance becomes reciprocity. You've stabilized your inner field enough to notice when the outer field speaks back. And it doesn't speak in grand gestures or neon signs. It whispers. It nudges. It aligns small details in ways you never could have planned. You find yourself standing next to someone who shares the exact insight you needed. You hear a phrase on a podcast that answers a question you hadn't even followed. The decision you feared becomes effortless once you stop overthinking and just breathe. These moments are not luck. They are coherence meeting coherence. They are two fields, yours and the larger one, tuning together, like strings of the same instrument. And when this becomes your lived reality, the world no longer feels random. It feels symphonic, but don't mistake this for perfection. Even in coherence, life continues to include difficulty, loss, uncertainty. Alignment is not immunity, it's intimacy. It allows you to be in contact with life without being devoured by it. You can face grief without becoming it. You can feel fear without following it. You can experience disappointment without collapsing. This is emotional agility, not spiritual bypass. Because coherence is not about bypassing pain. It's about metabolizing it, transforming it, listening to it until it no longer needs to scream. And the more you practice this, the more you begin to trust your inner instruments. Your gut becomes trustworthy again. Your breath becomes a barometer. Your stillness becomes a sanctuary, not a performance. Let's bring this into the body. Right now, as you read, take a breath, not a deep one, not a forced one, just a sincere one. Let the inhale arrive like a wave. Let the exhale fall away like mist. Bring your awareness to the space around your heart, not your physical heart. Alone, but the area in your chest where presence often gets blocked by pressure. Imagine this space widening with every breath. Imagine it as a chamber of quiet resonance, not glowing, not flashing, just steady. Here, ask yourself, not with your thoughts, but with your attention. What would it feel like if I trusted this moment completely? Don't answer. Just feel what rises. Maybe it's a release in your jaw, a loosening in your shoulders, a soft ache in your chest. That's coherence arriving. Not because you forced it, but because you made room for it. The more often you return to this space, the more it becomes your compass. Not to avoid life, but to navigate it. Coherence doesn't erase the map, it makes it readable. You begin to sense when an opportunity is in rhythm with your field, and when it's static, dressed as sparkle. You begin to choose from the inside out, and because your energy is no longer fragmented by contradiction, your choices carry more weight. You say yes without second guessing. You say no without apology. You walk into rooms differently. You bring the storm in your chest into stillness, not by silencing it, but by harmonizing with it. Now something remarkable happens. Your coherence becomes a kind of silent transmission. People feel you before you speak. They sense the calm not as a mask, but as a depth. And some will be drawn to it. Others may resist it. Why? Because coherence destabilizes incoherence. Your calm may unintentionally surface someone else's chaos. And that's okay. You're not here to fix or convert. You're here to emit, to embody. And sometimes that means letting go of relationships, patterns, or environments that were built around your former static. The field doesn't just organize your desires, it organizes your life. And that means things may fall away, not as punishment, but as resonance rebalancing itself. Trust that. Let the old patterns dissolve like leaves on water. Their time is complete. This is where your power deepens. Not the kind that seeks to control, but the kind that understands timing. You stop rushing. You stop begging. You stop proving. You wait not in passivity, but in preparation. You know that what is yours cannot miss you if you remain in tune. You become less interested in manipulating outcomes and more devoted to refining your signal. And strangely, when you stop grasping, life opens. Not all at once, but in a rhythm you can trust. Your creativity returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your relationships deepen. Not because you found the perfect affirmation, but because you stopped fighting your own frequency. Let's speak plainly. You will drift again. You will have days where the static returns, where the nervous system feels hijacked, where the breath shortens and the noise grows loud. This is not regression. This is rehearsal. Each return to coherence strengthens the muscle. Each moment you notice the drift and gently guide yourself back is a rewiring. This is neuroplasticity in motion. You're retraining your system, not to be perfect, but to be aware. And awareness is the bridge between experience and transformation. You stop fearing your reactions because you know how to return from them. That's sovereignty. That's power that doesn't shout dot at this level of coherence. Even your perception of time begins to shift. You no longer experience time as a force chasing you, but as a rhythm unfolding with you. You stop trying to speed up your manifestations and begin to savor the alignment of them. There's pleasure in the pause. There's beauty in the delay. You trust that the gap between intention and outcome is not a void, but a tuning chamber. And you wait not because you've given up, but because you know what rushed alignment costs. Your nervous system becomes your calendar. Your breath becomes your strategist. Your energy becomes your plan. You start to notice how much of life is rhythm. The way plants grow in silence. The way clouds form and dissipate without needing validation. The way rivers bend not out of weakness, but out of intelligence. You begin to mirror nature, not in slowness, but in wisdom. You stop trying to dominate life and begin to move with it. That's the deepest coherence of all, to live as if you belong to this universe, not as a visitor, not as a fixer, but as a frequency. And so, you arrive at a new kind of knowing, not cognitive, but cellular. You no longer need to be convinced of your worth, your path, your timing. You feel it. You trust it. You embody it. This is not the peak. This is the pulse, the rhythm you return to again and again. And it's this rhythm that shapes reality, not through noise, but through stillness. Not through force, but through resonance. You are not here to yell your desires into the void. You are here to hum them into harmony. You are not here to manipulate the field. You are here to remember that you are the field. You are not broken. You are tuning. And the universe is already listening. You might think the story should end where certainty begins. When the breath slows, the energy stabilizes. The synchronicities feel undeniable. But coherence is not a destination. It is a state you revisit, restore, and refine like tuning an instrument each day. Part 4 isn't the epilogue. It's the quiet inheritance of everything you've remembered so far. It's what happens after the insight, after the shift, when you're no longer asking, does this work? But instead living as if your energy is the foundation upon which all else rises. You walk more slowly, not because you're lazy, but because you trust timing. You speak less urgently, not because you're passive, but because you've learned that silence carries more precision than noise. This stillness that now lives in you doesn't just help you manifest better, it helps you experience life more deeply. It's not about changing the world in one grand gesture. It's about becoming the kind of presence that reshapes the frequency of every room you enter. Not by effort, but by embodiment. And here, something sacred happens. You begin to feel when your field is drifting, not as panic, but as a whisper. You sense the tightening in your belly when your decisions bend toward approval. You feel the static rise in your chest when your actions aim to prove. But instead of spiraling, you pause, you breathe, you return. The act of returning becomes familiar, even graceful. It's like stepping back onto the path without needing to be punished for having wandered. There's no guilt in the drift, only an invitation in the noticing. And so the loop becomes less dramatic. Instead of crashing into rock bottoms, you begin to course correct mid-flight. You hear your nervous system before it screams. You spot misalignment while it's still a murmur. This isn't self-mastery, it's self-relationship. And the deeper you go, the more you trust that the body isn't a liability to coherence. It's the amplifier of it. This level of coherence changes your memory. You start to reinterpret the past, not by rewriting events, but by seeing them through a more integrated lens. The heartbreak you once saw as failure becomes the moment your field cracked open. The delay that once felt cruel becomes the space where you were being retuned. The friendships that dissolved no longer feel like betrayals, but like resonance, finding its true home. This isn't spiritual rationalization, it's energetic clarity. You're no longer interpreting life from a place of fear, but from a place of rhythm. And rhythm redefines meaning. You begin to thank moments you once resented, not because they were painless, but because they revealed your signal. Pain has become a teacher, not a sentence. And in this, your timeline changes not externally, but internally. You are no longer the victim of random chaos. You are the instrument refining its pitch across time. As this stabilizes, your relationship with desire evolves. You still want things deeply. You still dream, intend, create. But you no longer treat desire as a problem to be solved or a test to be passed. You treat it as a frequency to be embodied. You don't chase outcomes. You cultivate coherence. You trust that the field doesn't respond to begging, it responds to tuning. So instead of asking, "How do I get this?" you ask, "What would the version of me who already lives this feel like now?" And you sit inside that frequency not to force results, but to become the kind of resonance that naturally allows those results to land. This subtle shift takes you out of obsession and into embodiment. The need to prove dissolves. The need to rush relaxes. And the field, once again, listens. Your definition of success begins to change. No longer measured only by milestones or manifestations, success becomes about how consistently you can return to your center. How gently you can meet resistance without collapsing into it. How clearly you can feel your yes and honor it even when it's inconvenient. This inner success often goes unnoticed by the world. There are no trophies for regulating your nervous system, no awards for breathing through shame. But you know, and the field knows. And your body becomes a record of these quiet victories. A slower heart rate, a clearer mind, a sleep that doesn't need assistance. These are not minor achievements. These are signs that you are no longer at war with yourself. And perhaps now you're wondering, what happens when two coherent beings meet? What does resonance look like in relationship, in collaboration, in shared vision? It looks like conversations, where silence isn't awkward, where presence holds more weight than performance, where mutual regulation happens without effort. It looks like disagreements that don't fracture connection, but reveal deeper truths. It looks like creativity, that feels effortless, timed like breath. These relationships aren't always romantic, but they are always sacred. Because they are not built on matching trauma. They are built on matching rhythm. And when you find one, you don't feel the need to hold on tightly. You trust the field to hold both of you. Still, some relationships will dissolve as your signal changes. This is not abandonment, it's vibrational honesty. And while it may hurt, there's also relief. You are no longer betraying your coherence to maintain connections that can't meet you. You bless them, you release them, and you let your field do the sorting. No longer from fear of being alone, but from a reverence for resonance. This creates space for the new, not just people, but environments, ideas, timelines that meet you. Where you are now, not where you once needed to survive. And in this new space, you bloom differently. Not louder, not brighter, just truer. Your sense of service also shifts. You stop trying to save the world. You start tuning yourself and letting the ripple do the work. This doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You choose fewer battles, but you show up more fully. You speak less often, but with more clarity. You realize that presence is activism, that coherence is contagion, that the most revolutionary thing you can offer is not more noise, but more. Nervous system safety broadcasted quietly, but felt deeply in this frequency. Life begins to feel enchanted again, not because it's perfect, but because you are finally present. A bird call isn't background noise. It's a message. A delayed email isn't a problem. It's perfect pacing. A missed turn isn't a mistake. It's a redirection. You begin to trust the intelligence beneath randomness. You find poetry in patterns. You feel the universe breathing with you, not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality. And then something unexpected happens. You realize you've become someone you used to seek. The wise one, the grounded one, the calm in the storm. And not because you reached enlightenment, but because you remembered how to listen. You no longer outsource wisdom. You no longer wait for signs. You are the sign. Your field, your frequency, your presence, it speaks louder than strategy ever could. Still, the world will try to pull you out. Urgency will knock. Old fears will whisper. But now, you have a different response. You smile. You pause. You breathe. You return. Again and again. Because now you know, this is not a trick. It's not a trend. It's not a hack. It's your true state, your resting note. And every time you return to it, the world reshapes around it, not instantly, but inevitably. You begin to see how little you need to force, how much you can allow, and how deeply you are held not by something outside you, but by the rhythm within you. You stop proving. You start emitting. You stop chasing peace. You start living from it. And when you look back, if you even feel the need to, you won't remember the moment things changed, because it won't be a moment. It will be a frequency you carried, a stillness you chose, a quiet coherence that became your compass, your voice, your truth. You have not become someone new. You have become someone true. You have not escaped your old self. You have integrated her. You are not building your life from scratch. You are remembering the frequency that was always yours. The field is not magic. It's precision. And now, you are aligned with it. This is coherence. This is power. This is the stillness that rewires reality. By now, your nervous system recognizes the tone of this journey, not as entertainment, but as a homecoming. This isn't just a story anymore. It's a frequency you've grown familiar with. The soft rhythm of presence, the gentle wave of coherence, the invitation to remember, again and again, that your being, your felt, rhythmic, attuned presence is the technology through which reality begins to reshape. Part 5 does not escalate into fireworks. It does not promise climax. It offers something more powerful: continuation, continuity, the kind of lived coherence that doesn't need to prove itself to be real. This is the texture of mastery in a world obsessed with spectacle. You're quiet. Return to self, without drama, without doubt, without needing to start over. You are not chasing the state anymore. You are walking with it. In this place, you begin to witness life differently, not just events, but the architecture underneath them. You notice how synchronicities increase not because the world is suddenly magical, but because your perception has become sensitive enough to see the subtle threadwork always weaving beneath the surface. You see the patterns not just of your past, but of the entire energy matrix around you. How thoughts ripple into matter, how words shift the field, how emotions paint your electromagnetic broadcast in real time. It doesn't make you omniscient, it makes you observant. And from this place of quiet observation, power arises. Not the power to control others, but the power to remain coherent while life shifts around you. A power to know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to stay still and let the field rearrange itself in response to your stabilized frequency. And it does. The more you stay within your own coherence, the more life responds in kind, but not always in the ways your mind expects. Sometimes the door closes so the path can open. Sometimes the call doesn't come so you can listen inward. Sometimes the thing you thought was misalignment was actually protection, your field blocking a timeline that wasn't true for you. In these moments, the old self might panic, but the coherent self breathes, listens, waits. It remembers that alignment isn't about comfort, it's about truth. And truth doesn't always arrive as pleasure. Sometimes it arrives as clarity disguised as disruption. But even disruption can be welcomed if you've built trust with your nervous system. Even the unknown can be honored if you've remembered how to stabilize your breath. It's in this energetic maturity that your reality begins to ripple outward differently. You no longer get pulled into conflict that isn't yours. You no longer abandon yourself for belonging. You begin to walk through life as a tuning fork, choosing resonance over approval. And in doing so, you shift the rooms you enter, not by convincing, but by emitting. This becomes your quiet influence, not leadership as dominance, but leadership as attunement. Others begin to feel safer in your presence, not because you're perfect, but because your field says, it's safe to be. And safety is the new magnetism. Coherence is the new charisma. People don't always know why they feel different around you, but they do. And your work is not to explain it, it's to continue practicing it. Let's look at what that practice can look like now, in the ordinary rhythm of a modern life. It's not always a silent retreat or a breathwork session. Sometimes it's sipping your morning tea without scrolling. Sometimes it's placing your hand over your heart when someone says something that triggers you, and breathing before you respond. Sometimes it's closing your laptop at 80% completion because your body says, that's enough for now. These are not spiritual acts, they are coherent acts. They tell the nervous system, I trust you. And over time, that trust builds an inner environment so stable, the external chaos can't shake it. The field doesn't need your perfection. It needs your presence. It needs your willingness to return. This is the difference between trying to manifest from anxiety and allowing reality to flow from coherence. Anxiety says, I need this to happen so I can feel safe. Coherence says, I feel safe, so I trust what happens. One is a demand, the other is an invitation. And the quantum field doesn't respond to demands, it responds to invitations. This is why your coherent state changes your timeline. Not because the field rewards you, but because it matches you. Like a mirror tuning to your signal, like a landscape reshaping itself around the energy you bring. You become both sender and receiver, both participant and observer. and the world quietly, precisely responds. You begin to develop a deeper relationship with rhythm itself. You notice the ebbs and flows in your own energy without judgment. You begin to time your actions not by obligation, but by resonance. You know when it's a yes, because it feels like a click, not loud, but inevitable. You know when it's a no, because your chest tightens, your breath shortens, and your nervous system whispers, not this way. You stop overriding that signal. You honor it. You trust that your energy knows the path, even when your logic does not. This doesn't mean life becomes without friction, but the friction becomes informative, not punitive. Each moment of tension is simply a tuning, a recalibration, an invitation to return once again to the frequency that aligns you with truth. And eventually, something almost imperceptible begins to shift. You stop bracing for the worst, not because you've become naive, but because you've retrained your system to trust your capacity to respond. You no longer fear your emotions. You let them speak and release. You no longer suppress your impulses. You listen and refine. You no longer delay your joy until some future arrival. You find it in the moment, unremarkable, quiet, real. The texture of your life changes. The silence becomes richer. The small things, sunlight through blinds, the smell of warm bread, the laughter you weren't expecting feel like sacred data. Not because they're dramatic, but because you're present enough to receive them. This is the richness no money can buy. This is the wealth of coherence. And now, with this deepened sensitivity, your vision expands. You no longer just want things. You want to live them. You no longer just dream of outcomes. You ask, what is the energy of that dream? And how can I feel it now? That now becomes the portal. That now becomes the tuning chamber. And from that now, life begins to offer reflections so precise, so strange, so beautiful, you stop calling them coincidences. You call them confirmations. The thing you wrote down 3 months ago, it arrives softly. The decision you avoided suddenly becomes clear without effort. The person you once had to chase now shows up in flow, not because you manipulated the timeline, but because you matched it. You didn't push the river. You became the bank that could hold it. This is not magic. This is resonance. And resonance is the oldest truth in the universe. Everything responds to the field it's held in. Atoms, cells, people, ideas, all of them entrain. And now, you are living as the field, not just reacting to it. You don't wait for the world to calm down so you can find peace. You bring peace to the room and watch how the world changes shape. You don't demand signs from the universe. You become a sign, a living, breathing frequency that reminds others. What is possible when we remember who we are beneath the static? You've become the stillness. And that stillness is not passive. It is intelligent. It is active. It is alchemical. It transforms not by pressure, but by presence. It reshapes reality not by force, but by fidelity to truth, to rhythm, to self. You are the frequency now, and your coherence is not fragile. It is not a state you visit. It is a baseline you return to with reverence. The world may forget, but you remember. The noise may rise, but you quiet. The pace may quicken, but you slow. Because you know, everything real responds to rhythm, and your rhythm is becoming unmistakable. This story will soon close, but the resonance continues. The breath will go on. The signal will keep pulsing. The field will always listen. At this stage, something beautiful becomes undeniable. Coherence is no longer a state you chase. It's a relationship you nurture. You no longer ask, how do I get there? Because you understand now that there was always a vibration away. You've lived enough inside the rhythm of your own breath to know that the path is not linear. It's resonant. It loops. It returns. It deepens. And part 6 is not a finale, it's a remembering that keeps unfolding. Again and again, each time softer, each time more precise. This is not the end of a lesson, it's the continuation of a life. One in which your nervous system is your compass, your coherence is your home, and the field, this invisible, intimate web of quantum intelligence, is your mirror, your dance. Partner, your quiet confirmation that you are, indeed, shaping the world in every moment through who you are being. This understanding reorients how you make choices. You stop outsourcing clarity to logic alone. You let your body vote. You let silence vote. You let the feeling of expansion or contraction guide you. No longer do you override the whisper because the world demands a shout. You've seen too many times now how the whisper is the truth before it becomes words. That tiny flicker in your gut, that sensation of not quite right, even when something looks perfect on paper. That strange flutter of knowing that arrives before your mind has any explanation for it. This is not foolishness. It is sensitivity. And sensitivity is not weakness. It is quantum intelligence operating at high resolution. The world has tried to numb this gift, to tell you to doubt your knowing unless it can be proven. But now, your coherence has made your knowing undeniable. You trust the texture of truth, even if it's quiet. You recognize the frequency of alignment, even if it defies logic. And in doing so, you begin to live from the inside out, not because it's trendy, but because it's effective. It works. You've watched reality rearrange, not in response to your pressure, but in response to your precision. You've watched dreams become daily life, not through hustle, but through harmony. And perhaps most freeing of all, you've begun to realize that what you thought you wanted often pales in comparison to what alignment brings when you stop trying to control the outcome and start listening to the rhythm. This is where ease enters, not as laziness, but as refined effort. You still work, but you work from inspiration, not obligation. You still move, but your movement is timed to energy, not panic. You begin to notice the rhythm of your own expansion, the seasons within your system. Some days are for output, some for input, some for stillness. You honor them all. You don't shame your need for rest. You don't guilt your desire for quiet. You understand now that alignment is not just about creating, it's about calibrating. And that calibration is what keeps your signal clean, your impact potent, your relationships clear. Relationships, too, transform inside this new rhythm. You no longer need to be understood by everyone. You no longer perform coherence to make others comfortable. You don't dim your sensitivity or inflate your confidence. You simply show up clean, not perfect, but honest. And that honesty creates a kind of gravitational field. The people meant to walk with you feel it. They may not articulate it, but they know there is safety here. Not because you never wobble, but because you return so gracefully. You're emotional. Fluency becomes magnetic. Your capacity to hold complexity without collapsing becomes a refuge for you and for others. You don't have to fix. You just have to be. And when conflict arises, as in it will, you don't fear it. You meet it as energy asking to be brought into coherence. You breathe. You stay. You speak not to defend your position, but to reveal your frequency. You no longer need to win. You need to remain aligned. And that shift redefines every interaction. Conversations become clearer. Boundaries become cleaner. Intimacy deepens, not by effort, but by resonance. You begin to feel the difference between connection that requires management and connection that allows mutual regulation. The former drains, the latter nourishes. And you, no longer addicted to relational chaos, choose nourishment. Again and again. This is emotional mastery, not because you never feel reactive, but because you know how to pause and listen before you act. You trust your wave. You don't interrupt your process to look composed. You don't override your signal to stay agreeable. You remain coherent inside truth. And when you drift, and you will, you don't shame yourself. You return, gracefully, like breath. Even your creativity is transformed by this. It no longer requires pressure to be productive. You've learned that creativity flows best, not when it's forced into schedules, but when space is made for it. To land, you give yourself that space. You curate conditions where inspiration visits not as a guest, but as a familiar. You stop chasing muses and begin embodying the frequency that calls them in. Your ideas are clearer. Your output is purer. Your joy in the process returns, not because you've figured it all out, but because you've stopped resisting your natural rhythm. And maybe now you see how much resistance had built up over the years, not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid. Afraid to slow down. Afraid to feel. Afraid to listen to the signal your body was sending. And that fear created static. That static distorted your perception. But now, after all this practice, you begin to sense a new baseline forming. Fear still visits, but it doesn't govern. Doubt still arrives, but it doesn't paralyze. You are no longer ruled by internal weather. You are rooted. And from this rootedness, the world responds differently. You meet the moment not with reactivity, but with rhythm. Not with certainty, but with curiosity. You don't need to know everything. You need to stay tuned, and so you do. In ordinary ways. With small rituals. With quiet pauses. With deep listening. You don't need to prove your growth to anyone. Your field speaks for itself. Your presence testifies. Your coherence felt, not flaunted, is the offering. And that offering shapes more than you can see. People shift because of your steadiness. Rooms feel different because of your tone. Opportunities align because of your clarity. Not because you demanded them, but because you made space for them to land. They become the kind of person who doesn't just react to the world, they inform it. You shape timelines not by chasing outcomes, but by vibrating truth. Your desires are clean. Your breath is steady. Your energy is refined. You still wobble. You still wonder. But you no longer lose yourself inside the wondering. You stay. You breathe. You remember, and in remembering, you radiate. This is the field. This is the rhythm. This is the stillness that doesn't end, it deepens. And now, as the story exhales into silence, you may realize it was never asking you to change who you are, only to remember how deeply you've already been in tune with life all along. Not through noise, but through noticing. Not through effort, but through rhythm. The stillness you've been exploring isn't a destination. It's a doorway that stays open each time you choose breath over panic, presence over performance, alignment over urgency. There will be days you forget. That's okay. The return is the practice, and the return is enough. You are not here to force the universe into form. You are here to listen it into harmony. So take one last breath. Let it soften you. Let it remind your body that it belongs here, exactly as it is. And when you close your eyes tonight, may the stillness stay with you, not as a memory, but as your home frequency. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. Other stories are also waiting for you. Quiet ones, true ones, just like this.